My fellow Sazaiters, on the 15th of August 2011, a suspicious fire ended the life of General Solomon Mujuru. A man who was a war hero like no other. You see, Zimbabwe has countless veterans of the liberation struggle, but very few have a CV like that of General Solomon Mujuru. Here was a man who was the only top ZNA commander to have served in both ZIPRA and ZANLA. The only top ZNA commander to have commanded both ZIPRA and ZANLA under ZIPA. The only top ZANLA commander who could hold a heated conversation with the legendary Tongogara and possibly change his mind. You see, if it wasn't for General Solomon Mujuru, probably Robert Mugabe wouldn't have become ZANU president. If it wasn't for General Mujuru, probably Tongogara would have found it extremely difficult to reclaim his authority in ZANLA after his release from a Zambian prison. If it wasn't for General Mujuru, then probably Emmerson Mnangagwa would have become vice president in 2004, 10 years earlier than he eventually did. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a commander of commanders, a kingmaker, a gallant soldier and guerrilla fighter. From his birth in Chikomba to his early political activism in Bulawayo, from ZIPRA to ZANLA to ZIPA, all the way to taking over from Tongogara after his death in 1979, later leading the ZNA for 11 years and later still influencing the rise of his wife to the presidium, only to finally die like a mere commoner. This is a story of a legend like no other, a commander of commanders, the story of Rex Nongo, the story of Solomon Mujuru, Zimbabwe's first black National Army commander. My fellow Sazaiters, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, vasinamalites, varikudya rice, never sinama rights. I welcome you to the special report. This is part one of a three-part series as we take a look at the death of General Solomon Mujuru. But we can't just talk about his death without understanding the man. We need to know and understand his political role as a kingmaker in ZANU-PF, his political role as the top ZNA commander, his political role as a ZANLA commander, and of course, his formative years in politics under ZAPU. This is a comprehensive look into the birth, the life, and effectively, the death of General Solomon Mujuru. Solomon Mujuru was born in Chikomba on the 5th of May, 1945. That's 35 years before independence. At that time, Zimbabwe was known as Southern Rhodesia. The head of state was the British King, King George VI, KG6. Yeah, the KG6 military barracks in Zimbabwe were named after this guy. KG6 means King George VI. He was the father of Queen Elizabeth. So there you have it. KG6 was the head of state of Southern Rhodesia when Solomon Mujuru was born. The prime minister was Godfrey Huggins. At this time, there wasn't any vibrant national political party that represented blacks. Robert Mugabe was 21 when Mujuru was born. Joshua Nkomo was 28. So Solomon Mujuru was born in a family of 12, him being number 10. He had a very tough upbringing. His mother died when he was only 3 years old. In fact, Solomon's birth was almost like a prophecy of the drama-filled life he would lead until his tragic demise. What happened is that Solomon's mother, Maidei, almost died giving birth to him. You see, the Mujuru family had a tradition that if a woman has trouble giving birth, she had to be sent outside the village and give birth there. That's exactly what happened when Solomon Mujuru was born. His mother had complications giving birth, so she was sent outside the village and gave birth to Solomon under a musasa tree. Yeah, I kid you not. Growing up as a toddler, Solomon was nicknamed Ruzambu because he was very thin, frail, and sickly. He became very ill after the death of his mother, and in fact, because of this sickness, his father abandoned him, leaving him in the care of his elder sister. And also, because of this sickness, Solomon only started his primary education at the age of 10. He would later move to Masvingo, where he continued with his education at Zimuto School, where he did standard 4 up to 6. It was during his days at Zimuto School that Solomon started developing an interest in politics because of the influence of one of his teachers, Kumbirai Kangai, Zimbabwe's first Minister of Labor. You see, Kangai had this habit of politicizing his students at night in order to avoid getting arrested, obviously. Kangai was an active member of the NDP and later ZAPU and later still ZANU. So Solomon Mujuru got into politics because of the influence of his teacher, Kumbirai Kangai. In fact, in 1962, Solomon Mujuru was expelled from Zimuto School because he had participated in a demonstration. Dear parents, do you see the influence of teachers on your children? This great general who helped liberate Zimbabwe was introduced to politics by his teacher, Kumbirai Kangai. I myself, a simple content creator, I love history because of my Form 1 history teacher. I love politics because of my A-level business studies teacher. The influence of teachers on students. Anyway, after getting expelled from Zimuto School in 1962, Mujuru continued with his political activism under ZAPU because at this time, ZAPU was the only national political party that represented black people. But as we all know, in 1963, ZAPU split, and this created a new party called ZANU, led by Ndabaningi Stole. When ZAPU split, Solomon Mujuru was living in Bulawayo. He didn't join ZANU. He remained in ZAPU partly because Bulawayo in the whole of Matebeleland was solidly behind Joshua Nkomo, but largely because, initially, ZANU was not at the level of ZAPU in influence and support. In fact, ZANU struggled in its early days to make inroads in Mashonaland. Actually, ZANU was only accepted as a real player by the OAU in 1972. Before that, the OAU had always seen ZANU as an unnecessary rebel group. It was through the great work of Herbert Chitepo that regional leaders finally started warming up to ZANU. But the Zambian president, Kenneth Kaunda, never fully accepted ZANU until after independence. Kaunda always had a soft spot for ZAPU because of his friendship with Joshua Nkomo. Now, as I said before, when ZAPU split in 1963, Mujuru did not join ZANU. He remained in ZAPU, later becoming an organizing secretary for the Mzilikazi branch of the ZAPU Youth League. From then onwards, he never looked back, later deciding to join the armed struggle as a guerrilla fighter. He got his first military training in Zambia under ZAPU, where he got his war nickname Rex Nongo. You see, during the armed struggle, fighters were not allowed, they were not permitted to use their real names. This was done in order to conceal their identities so that their families back home wouldn't get into trouble. So, I ask you, what do you think your war nickname would have been? I think mine would have been Comrade Ferefetai Mabunu. Ko, tirimferefetika, andingo wereketa. President Mnangagwa had many war nicknames. He had nicknames like Smart Tembo, Ruka Chivende, Trabablas Zokerai Mabunu, Skoprohiho Dohoro Dos. Solomon Mujuru was simply Rex Nongo. Simple and straightforward, no drama. Rex Nongo. He was given this nickname by his ZAPU instructors during training. Little did they know that they were training a man who would one day become Zimbabwe's first black National Army commander. One of the commanders in the ZAPU army when Mujuru joined the armed struggle was this guy, Ambrose Mtiniri. In 1968, Mujuru was sent to Tanzania and Russia for further military training. And in 1969, he was sent to Bulgaria for training in a delegation that included the infamous Thomas Nari, popularly known for the Nari Rebellion. I will talk about the Nari Rebellion in part 2 of this video. Anyway, when Mujuru returned from Bulgaria, ZAPU was embroiled in a vicious factional conflict between Jason Moyo and James Chikerema. You see, Joshua Nkomo was in detention at this time. So when Nkomo was arrested, he instructed James Chikerema to go into exile and prepare for the armed struggle. Chikerema established ZAPU's first army with the help of Jason Moyo and others, but in no time at all, factionalism crept in and ZAPU split for the second time in 1971. This split created a new party called Frolizi, which also included people from ZANU like Nathan Shamyarira. The ZAPU factional battles greatly affected its war effort. Many trained guerrillas were left frustrated by the political squabbles and bickering at the expense of the armed struggle. This is what led to a defection of many ZAPU guerrillas to ZANU. So in 1971, Mujuru together with Thomas Nari and a few others left ZAPU and joined ZANU. At this stage, the ZANU army was under the leadership of Noel Mukono, with Tongogara directly under him. The political leader was Herbert Chitepo because the party president, Ndabaningi Stole, was in detention together with Mugabe and other senior members of ZANU. Most of them had been arrested in 1964. They then instructed Herbert Chitepo to lead ZANU in exile and prepare for the armed struggle. This is why many people think that Herbert Chitepo was president of ZANU, not realizing that he was just leader of the external wing of ZANU. His official title in ZANU was chairman. So, a chairman of both the party and also the Darere Chimurenga, which started off as the Revolutionary Council. When Mujuru joined ZANLA in 1971, he quickly noticed the difference in approach between ZIPRA and ZANLA. You see, ZIPRA was trained by the Soviet Union and ZANLA was trained by China. The Soviet instructors taught ZIPRA soldiers that the most decisive factor in war are weapons. And China, well, the Chinese instructors taught ZANLA soldiers that the most decisive factor in war are the people. So you politicize the people and even pressurize them to take a certain position. If necessary, you use people to win a war, whatever the revolution requires. It's called Mao Zedong thought or Mao Zedong thought. It teaches that the end justifies the means. The idea that if something is noble enough, then it doesn't matter how you get it. ZIPRA was trained as a conventional army, but ZANLA was trained as a guerrilla army. You see, ZIPRA soldiers wore military uniform and shiny boots, but ZANLA soldiers wore ordinary clothes. The reason for that is, according to Mao philosophy, the Mao philosophy teaches that guerrillas are supposed to blend in with the people, blend in with the masses, just like fish in the sea. Anyway, it didn't take long for Mujuru and Nari to rise through the ranks of ZANLA, becoming field commanders in no time. Mujuru went on a massive recruitment drive to beef up ZANLA numbers. His outstanding work saw him being promoted to provincial commander and also getting elected into the ZANLA High Command in 1973. In the same year, Tongogara took over leadership of the ZANU army from Noel Mukono, who had been the operational leader of ZANLA since its formation. So Tongogara became ZANU's chief of defense in 1973, and this marked the beginning of the end for Noel Mukono, but that's a story for another day. In 1974, Solomon Mujuru met his wife-to-be, Joyce. She was only 18 and staying at Tongogara's house in Zambia. Joyce Mujuru says that it's actually Tongogara who recommended her to Rex Nongo or Solomon Mujuru. So that means Rex vakachesterwa baby na Tongo. But vakazokanda shoko after 1 year, can you imagine? It took a while for Joyce Mujuru to accept Solomon's love proposal. She was at first skeptical of his intentions, mainly because he already had 2 kids with different women. But she finally accepted his love proposal, and as you can imagine, their romance wasn't at all rosy given the war situation. Love ye chisoja, love ye maganas, love ye kuondo, love ye kuchimoyo, love ye kuti miri pakati pekuchodana, bomba ravarati boof. That ends part 1 of the Mujuru series. In part 2, we're going to take a look at how Solomon Mujuru became the second in command in ZANLA and how he eventually took over from Josiah Tongogara at the end of 1979. We also want to look at Solomon Mujuru's role in quelling the Nari rebellion and also his involvement in ZIPA, which was a military union of ZIPRA and ZANLA. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please do like and share.
Vanonditevera totanga ndafere feta.